The morning my aunt called, I was standing in my kitchen in Nashville, pouring my second cup of coffee, wearing slippers with a hole in the left toe. It had been 7 years since I'd heard her voice. She didn't say hello. She didn't say my name. The first word out of her mouth was we. We need you, Cassidy. And I stood there, coffee going cold in my hand, thinking, isn't that something? Let me take you back to the summer of 2017, Millhaven, Georgia, a town so small the Dollar General was the nicest building on Main Street, and everybody's business was everybody else's entertainment. I was 24 years old. I just finished my associate's degree in accounting at the community college over in Dunmore, working nights at a call center and days at a dry cleaning counter to pay for it. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't impressive by any standard my family used to measure worth, which was, roughly, how much do you earn, who do you know, and how good do you look doing it? My cousin Brianna checked every one of those boxes. She was 27, newly engaged to a man named Fletcher who sold insurance, and she possessed that dangerous kind of southern sweetness that could gut you with a compliment. She was, according to every adult at every family function I can remember, going places, mostly because she never let anyone else stand in her way. I was not, apparently, going anywhere. My grandmother, Nettie Mae Holt, thought differently. She was 81 that summer, sharp as glass, grew her own tomatoes, made her own curtains, and had strong opinions about both. She'd worked 30 years at a textile mill in Dunmore and saved with a discipline that would embarrass most financial advisors. 3 months before she passed, she called me to her house. Not a group call, not a family meeting, just me. She sat me down at her kitchen table, the one with the yellow laminate top that had been there since before I was born, and she slid a piece of paper across to me. I set aside $15,000, she said. In your name, for school or a house or whatever it is you decide to build. Nobody touches it but you. She said that twice. Nobody touches it but you. She passed that September. Stroke, fast, the way she would have wanted. No long goodbyes, no tubes, no fuss. The grief was quiet for me. I cried alone because that's how my family worked. You didn't cry in front of them unless you wanted a performance back. The will reading was 2 weeks after the funeral. My Aunt Rhonda, Nettie's oldest daughter, Brianna's mother, ran the household like a general runs a war zone. Total control, zero tolerance for dissent. I asked about my account. 15,000, Grandma Nettie's words. My name. Rhonda looked at me with the patience of someone who has already decided the answer and is just waiting for you to finish asking the question. Cassidy, she said, your grandmother's accounts were consolidated to cover the estate costs. There wasn't anything left earmarked. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I looked at my mother, Loretta Holt, who has never once in my memory stood between me and anything that hurt me. She was studying the floor like it owed her answers, paralyzed by her chronic need to keep the peace. I looked at my Uncle Darren. He was meticulously pouring himself sweet tea from a pitcher, his eyes fixed dead on the ice cubes, choosing the coward's silence over the obvious truth. She told me, I said. She sat me down and told me herself. 15,000 in my name. Rhonda tilted her head. A little smile. The kind that isn't a smile at all. Baby, she was 81. She said a lot of things in those last months. She paused just long enough. We were worried about her memory. That sentence hit me like a slap. My grandmother, who had beat me at rummy 3 weeks before she died, who had recited her mother's cornbread recipe from memory without blinking, who had pointed out a typo in my graduation card and corrected it in red pen. Her memory. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I said calmly, I'd like to see the account records. Rhonda stood up, smoothed her skirt, and said it was time to start getting the food out for company. That was the end of the conversation. I stayed for the reception because leaving would have become its own story, and I was tired of being a story in other people's mouths. I washed dishes. I wrapped leftovers. I drove home to my apartment alone. 2 days later, Brianna posted on Facebook, new house announcement, all roses and champagne glasses, a 3-bedroom in Clover Ridge, the nicest subdivision in Dunmore. So grateful, the caption said, for everything that made this possible. 43 comments, nothing but congratulations. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time. Then I started doing the math. The account records request went nowhere. Rhonda said the estate attorney had everything and gave me a number that rang twice and disconnected. My mother told me I was making things harder than they needed to be. My uncle Darren told me, with the weary sigh of a man who found justice inconvenient, that Grandma Nettie wouldn't have wanted all this fuss. Nobody said, "We're sorry." Nobody said, "Let's look into it." What they said, in the weeks that followed, through text chains I was still on and phone calls I could half hear from across my mother's living room, was that I had turned mean after Grandma passed. That grief did things to people, that I needed to let it go and heal. 32 family members, 2 holidays, 1 birthday I spent alone because I couldn't sit at a table with those people and smile like nothing happened. Then I stopped sitting at the table at all. I packed 2 boxes and a duffel bag. I had $1,100 in my checking account, a job offer from a small accounting firm in Nashville I'd found on Indeed 3 weeks earlier, and a green cast-iron skillet that had been Grandma Nettie's that Rhonda had told me I could have because it was old. I drove out of Millhaven on a Tuesday morning before sunrise. I did not say goodbye. Nashville in the winter is gray and strange, and the best thing that ever happened to me. The accounting firm was 5 people in a converted house off Charlotte Pike. My boss, a man named Terrence, had a glass eye and a handshake that meant something. He taught me more in 6 months than 4 years of school combined. I rented a room from a woman named Gloria, 63, retired postal worker, 3 cats, opinions about everything. She became the closest thing I had to family for the first 2 years, and I mean that without irony. It cost me things. The leaving. No contact means no safety net. It means writing NA on emergency forms and watching other people get phone calls on their birthdays and sitting alone on Thanksgiving with leftover rotisserie chicken and reruns of a show you've already seen, because that is still quieter than the alternative. I'm not going to pretend it was easy, but here's what nobody tells you about walking away from people who've decided who you are. You get to decide instead. I worked. I saved. I took night classes for my CPA. I found a therapist named Dr. Okafor who told me in our 3rd session that accountability without apology is just blame with better manners. I thought about that for 6 months straight. By year 3, I had my own apartment. By year 5, I was managing 3 client accounts at the firm. By year 6, I was putting 10% of every paycheck into a savings account I named privately in my phone contacts after Grandma Nettie, not for any reason except that it felt right. 7 years. The call came on a Wednesday. I almost let it go to voicemail because I didn't recognize the Georgia area code, but I picked up. Cassidy. My Aunt Rhonda's voice, smaller than I remembered. We didn't know if you'd answer. I didn't say anything. She talked for 4 minutes. I counted. The version I got was this. Brianna's marriage to Fletcher had ended badly 18 months ago. The house in Clover Ridge went with it. Rhonda had co-signed a loan she shouldn't have. Darren's business had gone under during COVID. And she used the word restructuring, which is a way of saying falling apart without saying it. There was a property. Grandma Nettie's house, which had been sitting in the family trust. They needed to sell it, and they needed everyone's signature because, it turned out, Grandma Nettie had been smarter than any of them gave her credit for. She had included me in the trust. They needed my signature to release the sale. I sat down on my couch. "We thought you'd want to know," Rhonda said. And, "We want to make this right, Cassidy. We'd like for you to have a portion of the sale." She named a number. It was less than 15,000. I asked her to repeat it. She did. I said, "Aunt Rhonda, I'm going to need to think about this." She said she understood. She said she hoped we could move past all of it and put this behind us. She said Grandma Nettie would have wanted the family to be whole again. There was a pause. "Did you find the account records?" I asked. Silence. "The estate account. The one you said was consolidated. Did anyone ever look at where the 15,000 actually went?" She said that was a long time ago. I said I knew. I thanked her for calling and I hung up. I called a real estate attorney in Nashville that afternoon, not because I didn't already know what I was going to do, but because I wanted to understand every inch of the ground I was standing on before I stood on it. He told me I had every right to withhold my signature. He told me a trust sale without full consent goes nowhere. He told me I had leverage. I sat with that word for a while. Leverage. The thing I'd never once had in that family. The thing I'd never been given a reason to need because I'd always just moved when they pushed, bent when they pressed, washed the dishes and gone home quietly and paid my own way and asked nothing and gotten nothing and smiled through it anyway. I drafted an email that night. I rewrote it 4 times. The final version was 8 sentences long. I stated what I remembered, what Grandma Nettie told me, what the number was. I said I would be happy to sign the release documents, and I said I expected the full 15,000 plus 7 years of simple interest at 4%, wired to my account before any signature left my hand. I attached a calculation. I hit send at 11:14 p.m. Rhonda called back the next morning, a different voice this time, careful, formal. The voice of someone who'd been on the phone with their own attorney. She said they'd look into it. I said, "Take your time." 14 days later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize from a bank in Dunmore, Georgia, confirming a wire transfer had been initiated to my account. The amount was $17,640. I sat at my kitchen table, the one I bought secondhand from an estate sale in East Nashville, and I cried for the first time in years. Not because of the money, because my grandmother had been right. Nobody touched it but me. Brianna texted 2 weeks after the wire cleared. No context, no preamble. Just, "I'm sorry about how everything went. I hope you're doing okay." I read it 3 times. I put my phone down. I picked it up again. Then I wrote back, "Thank you." That was it. Not forgiveness, not an open door, just acknowledgement that she'd said something worth receiving. My mother called the following Sunday. We talked for 11 minutes, which is longer than we've talked in 7 years combined. She said she should have done more. She said it carefully, like she'd practiced it, and it wasn't everything I needed, but it was something. I said, "I know, Mom. Rhonda hasn't called again. That's fine." Last Saturday, I had dinner at my apartment with 5 people who I chose and who chose me back. My friend Kezia brought wine. Terrence, who still runs the firm even though he's semi-retired, brought peach cobbler and complained about it the whole time. Gloria drove up from Millhaven. Yes, I convinced her to move. And immediately reorganized my spice cabinet without asking. I made Grandma Nettie's cornbread. The recipe she recited to me once, from memory, without blinking. Somebody asked me to say a few words before we ate. I thought about the table in Millhaven with the yellow laminate top. I thought about being 24 and invisible. I thought about $1,100 and a cast iron skillet and a Tuesday morning in the dark. I said, "I'm grateful for people who choose to show up." Then we ate. If you're still listening, I want to say this directly. Maybe you know what it is to be the one who washes the dishes while everyone else celebrates. The one who gets called erratic when she asks a fair question. The one whose name gets removed from the story your family tells about itself. You are not too sensitive. You are not difficult. You are not the problem they made you out to be. The people who call you dramatic are usually the ones who don't want to deal with what you're describing. My family called me 7 years later because they needed something. Not because they were sorry, not because they missed me, because the house couldn't sell without me. And for the first time in my life, I was the one who got to decide what that was worth. Not in anger, not in spite, in math. Clean, honest math. Grandma Nettie would have approved. If you're sitting at a table right now where nobody asks about your life, where you're just there to fill a seat and absorb the weather, you're allowed to get up. You don't owe anyone a dramatic exit. You don't owe anyone a speech. You can just leave, quietly, and go build something so solid that 7 years later, when they finally need you, you're already standing on ground they can't move. My name is Cassidy Holt. I'm 31 years old, and the most valuable thing I own isn't in any account. It's knowing exactly what my grandmother meant when she said, "Nobody touches it but you." She wasn't just talking about money, she was talking about me.